You're under arrest for identity theft and bank fraud. That's what Detective Rodriguez said as he slapped handcuffs on my sister Natasha while she was cutting her pink and blue baby shower cake, surrounded by 50 guests who thought they were celebrating new life, not watching a criminal get what she deserved. My name is Juliana, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me, because have you ever loved someone so much that when they stabbed you in the back, the blade went so deep it hit your credit score, your savings account, and your entire future? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because what happened at that baby shower in Riverside Gardens was just the grand finale of the most twisted betrayal I never saw coming. It started 6 months ago on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other Tuesday in my small apartment in Millbrook Heights. I was getting ready for work, scrolling through my phone while my coffee brewed, when I got a call from First National Bank of Westridge. "Ms. Juliana Reeves?" The voice was professional, clipped. "This is Sarah from the fraud department. We need to speak with you immediately about some unusual activity on your account." My stomach dropped. Unusual activity. Those two words that every responsible adult dreads hearing. "What kind of unusual activity?" I asked, already knowing this wasn't going to be good news. "Ma'am, it appears someone has opened a business loan account using your social security number and personal information. The loan amount is substantial." Substantial. Such a polite word for what turned out to be $750,000. $750,000 that I never applied for, never signed for, never even knew existed until that phone call turned my entire world upside down. I took the day off work. Hell, I took the rest of the week off. I spent hours on the phone with the bank, with credit agencies, with anyone who would listen to my story about how my identity had been stolen. But here's what nobody tells you about identity theft. Proving you didn't do something is infinitely harder than proving you did do something. "Do you have any idea who might have access to your personal information?" Detective Martinez asked me during my initial police report. He was a tired-looking man with kind eyes who'd probably heard the story 1,000 times before. I ran through the list in my head. My parents, who lived 3 states away in Arizona and barely knew how to use email, let alone commit sophisticated financial fraud. My ex-boyfriend, Derek, but we'd broken up 2 years ago and he'd moved to Portland. My coworkers, but none of them had access to my social security number or my childhood address. And then there was Natasha. My sister Natasha, who was 2 years older and had always been the golden child. Natasha, who'd been struggling financially since her divorce from Trevor last year. Natasha, who was currently 5 months pregnant and posting daily on social media about how expensive everything was getting. Natasha, who'd been staying at my apartment off and on for the past few months while she got back on her feet. Natasha, who'd helped me organize all my important documents when I moved apartments 6 months ago, who joked about how organized I was, keeping everything in labeled folders, who'd said she wished she was as financially responsible as me. Natasha, who had access to everything. But I pushed that thought away because you don't suspect your own sister of destroying your life. You don't look at the person who shared a bedroom with you for 16 years and think, maybe she's the one who stole my entire financial identity. You don't want to believe that someone who calls you Jules and remembers your birthday and asks for advice about baby names could be capable of such calculated betrayal. So I kept looking elsewhere. I changed all my passwords, I froze my credit, I filed report after report, filled out form after form, spent hours on hold with customer service representatives who all asked the same questions and gave the same sympathetic responses. But the damage was done. My credit score plummeted from 780 to 312 overnight. The apartment I'd been saving to buy was no longer an option. The car loan I'd applied for was rejected. Even worse, because the fraudulent loan was technically in default, I was getting collection calls daily from companies demanding payment for money I never received. For weeks, I felt like I was drowning in someone else's debt, suffocated by someone else's lies, trapped in a financial nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I had no idea that the person responsible was sleeping in my guest bedroom, eating my food, and planning a baby shower that would end with handcuffs instead of gift bags. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before Detective Rodriguez made his dramatic entrance at the Riverside Gardens Community Center, before the cake was cut and the truth came out, I had to become a detective myself. And what I discovered about my sister Natasha would change everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and just how far someone will go when they think they'll never get caught. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. To understand how deeply this betrayal cut, you need to know about Natasha and me. We weren't just sisters, we were best friends, confidants, each other's emergency contacts. Growing up in the small town of Oakville, we shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams, and a bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that we'd arranged together when I was 8 and she was 10. Natasha was always the responsible one, the planner, the sister who remembered birthdays and organized family gatherings. When our parents, Linda and Robert, moved to Phoenix after Dad's retirement, it was Natasha who made sure we all stayed connected. She'd coordinate holiday visits, send group texts about family news, and never forgot to call Mom on the anniversary of Grandma Ruth's passing. I was the creative one, the dreamer, who went to art school and took risks. But Natasha, she was steady. She married her college boyfriend Trevor right after graduation, bought a house in the suburbs of Millbrook Heights, and seemed to have her entire life mapped out before she turned 25. While I was bouncing between freelance design gigs and studio apartments, she had a mortgage, a 401k, and dinner parties where everything matched. For years, I looked up to her financial stability. She'd give me advice about credit scores and retirement planning. She's the one who taught me to organize my important documents in those labeled folders. "Jules, you're so scattered with money stuff," she'd say, not meanly, but like an older sister who wanted to help. "Let me show you how to keep track of everything properly." She helped me set up my first real savings account when I landed my job at Anderson Marketing 3 years ago. We celebrated at Antonio's Italian restaurant, her treat. And she raised her wine glass and said, "To my baby sister, finally getting her financial life together." I was so proud to have her approval. When her marriage started falling apart 18 months ago, I was the first person she called. I spent countless nights listening to her cry about Trevor's gambling problem, his late nights, the way he'd hidden debt from her. She'd come over to my apartment with takeout and tissues, and we'd sit on my couch like we were teenagers again, except instead of talking about boys and school drama, we were talking about divorce lawyers and credit card debt. "I feel so stupid, Jules," she'd say, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I thought I was so smart about money, and I let him destroy everything we built." When she finally filed for divorce, I helped her move out. I took vacation days to help her pack, drove the rental truck to her new apartment, even lent her my emergency fund, $5,000 I'd been saving for years, to cover her security deposit and first month's rent. "I'll pay you back as soon as the divorce settlement comes through," she promised. And I believed her, because this was Natasha. She always kept her word. But the settlement never came. Trevor had hidden more debt than anyone realized. The house was underwater on the mortgage. Their joint accounts were frozen due to his gambling debts. By the time the lawyers sorted everything out, there was nothing left to split. Natasha was devastated. The stable, financially responsible sister I'd always known was suddenly working 2 part-time jobs just to make rent. She was waitressing at Bruno's Diner during the day and doing bookkeeping for small businesses at night. The stress was visible. She'd lost weight, developed dark circles under her eyes, and stopped wearing the cute outfits she used to love. Then came the pregnancy news. "I'm scared, Jules," she admitted when she told me she was expecting. "The timing couldn't be worse. I can barely afford my studio apartment, and now there's gonna be a baby." The father was someone she'd met at a coffee shop, Marcus Chen, a guy who seemed nice enough but wasn't ready for commitment or fatherhood. When she told him about the pregnancy, he moved to Seattle for a job opportunity that conveniently started immediately. So I did what sisters do. I offered her my guest bedroom temporarily while she figured things out. I helped her sign up for state assistance programs. I drove her to prenatal appointments when morning sickness made it impossible for her to drive herself. I researched affordable childcare options and helped her apply for jobs with better benefits. For 4 months, we lived together like roommates. She'd cook dinner while I worked late on design projects. We'd watch movies and fold baby clothes she'd gotten from thrift stores and garage sales. It felt like old times, except now we were adults dealing with adult problems together. She seemed grateful, always thanking me for my help, always promising that she'd get back on her feet soon and never forget how much you've done for me. She'd joke about how I was going to be the best aunt in the world, how lucky her baby was to have someone like me in their life. During those months, she had full access to my apartment, my mail, my life. She knew my routine better than I did. She knew I kept all my important documents in a file cabinet in my home office. She knew my passwords because I'd ask her to check my email when I was in client meetings. She knew my mother's maiden name, my first pet's name, all those security questions that banks use to verify identity. But I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? This was the sister who'd taught me to balance a checkbook, who'd helped me understand credit scores, who'd been my role model for financial responsibility my entire adult life. I had no idea that behind her grateful smiles and promises to pay me back, she was studying my financial life like a roadmap to her own salvation. I didn't know that when she offered to help organize my tax documents, she was memorizing my social security number. I never suspected that her late-night bookkeeping work involved creating fake business documents with my name on them. I thought I was helping my pregnant sister get back on her feet. I had no idea I was providing her with everything she needed to steal my entire financial identity and destroy the credit and savings I'd spent years building. The sister I trusted with my spare key, my Wi-Fi password, and my deepest secrets had been planning the most elaborate betrayal of my life, right under my own roof. The decision to confront Natasha came on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after that devastating phone call from the bank. I'd spent those weeks living in a constant state of anxiety, watching my credit crumble, fielding calls from collection agencies, and slowly accepting that this wasn't some random hack or computer error. This was personal. This was someone who knew me intimately. I came home from work that evening to find Natasha in my kitchen, stirring a pot of her famous chicken and dumplings. She was humming softly, one hand resting on her growing belly, looking picture perfect in the way pregnant women do when they're glowing with happiness. The domestic scene felt surreal given the chaos raging inside my head. "Jules, perfect timing," she called out cheerfully. "Dinner's almost ready. I made your favorite." For a moment, I just stood in the doorway watching her. This was the sister who'd comforted me through my worst breakups, who'd driven 4 hours to help me move apartments, who'd held my hair back when I had food poisoning last Christmas. How could I possibly accuse this person, this pregnant, vulnerable person who was depending on me, of committing a crime that was destroying my life? But I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in my head. I'd made lists of questions, practiced different approaches, even consulted with a therapist about how to handle confronting a family member about suspected fraud. Dr. Patricia Williamson had been very clear. "Juliana, you need direct answers. This isn't about protecting feelings anymore. Your entire financial future is at stake." "Natasha, we need to talk," I said, setting my purse down on the counter with more force than necessary. She looked up from the stove, immediately reading the seriousness in my voice. "What's wrong? You look upset." "I am upset. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Her face changed subtly. Not guilty, exactly, but guarded, like someone bracing for impact. "Okay, what's going on?" I took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I found out that someone used my personal information to take out a business loan for $750,000. The bank is treating me like I'm responsible for it, my credit is destroyed, and whoever did this had access to information that only someone very close to me would know. Natasha's eyes widened. She turned off the burner and faced me fully. Oh my God, Jules, that's terrible. Identity theft is so scary. Do the police have any leads? Her response was perfect. Too perfect. The right amount of shock, the right level of concern, even the slight tremor in her voice that suggested she was genuinely upset on my behalf. But something about it felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing this conversation too. The person who did this knew my mother's maiden name, my childhood address, even my first pet's name, I continued, watching her face carefully. They created fake employment records for a consulting company. They forged my signature. This wasn't some random internet scam, Natasha. This was someone who knows me personally. She nodded sympathetically, her hand moving to her belly in that protective gesture pregnant women make. That's so violating. I can't imagine how you must feel. Have you considered that maybe it's someone from work? Or Derek? You guys dated for 2 years. He would know all that personal stuff. Derek lives in Portland now. He's been there for over a year. But he could have kept records, or maybe... Natasha, I interrupted her, my voice sharper than I intended. I need to ask you directly. Did you have anything to do with this loan? The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. She stared at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Not hurt, not angry, but calculating. Like she was running through options in her head, deciding which version of herself to be. Finally, she laughed. Actually laughed. Are you seriously asking me if I stole your identity? Jules, I'm your sister. I'm pregnant and barely scraping by. How would I even know how to do something like that? You helped me organize all my financial documents when I moved. You've been living here for months with access to everything. You know all my personal information. So do Mom and Dad. So does Derek. So do probably half a dozen other people in your life. Her voice was rising now, taking on that injured tone she'd perfected as a child whenever someone accused her of something. She was good, really good. The tears were starting now, just enough to make her eyes glassy without ruining her makeup. Her voice had that perfect quaver of someone who's deeply wounded by an unfair accusation. But I'd been living with doubt and suspicion for 3 weeks. I'd had time to think about every conversation, every moment when she'd been alone in my apartment, every time she'd offered to help me with my financial organization. I'd remembered things that seemed innocent at the time but felt sinister in hindsight. The loan application listed a business called Reeves Strategic Solutions. That's not just my last name, Natasha. That's the exact name of the consulting business you always said you wanted to start someday. Remember? Back when you were married to Trevor, you used to talk about starting your own bookkeeping and business consulting firm. You even researched the name. Her face went very still. The tears stopped as abruptly as they had started. That's a coincidence. Reeves is your name too, Jules, and Strategic Solutions is just generic business language. Is it because I remember you showing me the potential logo designs you'd sketched out? I remember you talking about how you'd already checked to make sure the name wasn't trademarked. I remember a lot of things now that I'm actually paying attention. The woman standing in my kitchen wasn't my sister anymore. She was a stranger wearing Natasha's face, and the mask was finally slipping. Her shoulders straightened. The vulnerable, pregnant victim act disappeared, replaced by something colder and more calculated. You're being paranoid. Pregnancy, stress, and financial problems are making you see conspiracies where there aren't any. I think you should talk to Dr. Williamson about increasing your therapy sessions. It was a masterful deflection, turning my legitimate concerns into symptoms of mental instability, using my own therapist's name to add credibility to her gaslighting. But it was a mistake, because I'd never told her Dr. Williamson's name. How do you know my therapist's name? I asked. Another silence. Another moment of her deciding which lie to tell next. You... you mentioned it? No, I didn't. I've never told you her name. The only way you could know that is if you've been going through my mail or my insurance statement.
The chicken and dumplings were getting cold on the stove. The domestic scene that had felt so warm and normal when I walked in now felt like a stage set for a play I didn't want to be in. Natasha straightened to her full height, and when she spoke again, her voice was different. Harder. More like the voice I'd heard on that mysterious voicemail greeting. I think you should be very careful about the accusations you're making, Jules, especially against someone who's been nothing but grateful for your help during the most difficult time of her life. It wasn't a denial, it was a threat. And in that moment, standing in my own kitchen looking at this person I thought I knew, I realized that my sister, my best friend, my confidant, the woman carrying my future niece or nephew, had not only stolen my identity and destroyed my financial life, but had been sitting across from me at dinner every night for months, watching me suffer and feeling absolutely nothing. The Natasha I'd loved and trusted was gone. Maybe she'd never existed at all. I walked to my bedroom, closed the door, and called Detective Martinez. Detective, this is Juliana Reeves. I think I know who stole my identity. What I discovered over the next 72 hours made my stomach turn and my hands shake with a rage I didn't know I was capable of feeling. Because while I had been agonizing over whether to suspect my own sister, she'd been living a completely different life right under my roof, a life funded entirely by my stolen identity. Detective Martinez arrived at my apartment Friday morning with a cybercrime specialist named Agent Rebecca Torres from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Agent Torres was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who spoke in the precise, clipped tones of someone who'd seen every type of fraud imaginable and wasn't impressed by any of it. Miss Reeves, we're going to need to conduct a thorough investigation of your living space and digital footprint, Agent Torres explained as she set up her laptop on my dining table. With your permission, we'd like to examine any shared computers, financial documents, and communication devices. I gave them full access to everything. What choice did I have? My life was already destroyed. I might as well find out exactly how it happened. Natasha had conveniently left that morning for what she called a prenatal yoga class. But I suspected she sensed the walls closing in. She had been unusually quiet since our kitchen confrontation, spending most of her time in the guest bedroom with the door closed, claiming she needed rest. Agent Torres started with my home computer, running sophisticated software that could recover deleted files and trace digital footprints. Within an hour, she found the first smoking gun. Your sister is quite tech-savvy, Agent Torres said, not looking up from her screen. She's been using your Wi-Fi to access multiple email accounts that don't belong to her. Look at this. She turned the laptop toward me, showing a recovery log that looked like gibberish to me, but apparently told a clear story to her trained eyes. She created several email addresses using variations of your name, juliana.reevesconsulting@gmail.com, j.reeves strategic@outlook.com, and Reeves Solutions LLC@yahoo.com. She's been using these to communicate with lenders, submit fake employment verification, and coordinate the loan fraud. My blood ran cold. Can you see what she wrote in those emails? We're recovering them now, but based on what I'm seeing, this isn't some desperate spur-of-the-moment crime. This was planned and executed over several months with impressive attention to detail. Detective Martinez was going through the filing cabinet in my home office, the same one Natasha had helped me organize when I moved in. Miss Reeves, are these your bank statements? He asked, holding up a manila folder. Yes, I keep all my financial documents organized by month. When did you last look through these files? I thought about it. Probably not since tax season. Why? He held up a stack of papers. Because someone has been photocopying these regularly. Look at the edges. See these slight fold marks and the faint impressions? These documents have been pressed against a scanner or copy machine multiple times. Agent Torres looked up from her computer. I'm finding evidence that she scanned and uploaded dozens of your personal documents to a cloud storage account. Bank statements, tax returns, employment records, even your lease agreement and utility bills. She created a complete digital archive of your financial identity.
The scope of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't some desperate sister making a panicked mistake. This was a criminal enterprise that had been operating in my own home for months. There's more, Agent Torres continued, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She didn't just steal your identity for one loan. She's been using your information to apply for credit cards, business bank accounts, even a mortgage pre-approval. Most of the applications were denied, but she kept refining her approach until she found a lender willing to approve the big loan. How many applications are we talking about? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer.
37 different financial institutions over the past 4 months. She was systematic, professional, learning from each rejection and improving her fake documentation. Detective Martinez found more evidence in the guest bedroom. Hidden in the back of the closet, behind maternity clothes I'd helped her buy, was a small, fireproof safe that definitely didn't belong to me. "Ma'am, do you recognize this safe? I've never seen it before in my life." He called Agent Torres over. They opened it using a paperclip. Apparently, Natasha wasn't as security conscious as she was fraud conscious. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence that painted a picture of my sister as someone I'd never known existed. Fake business cards for Reeves Strategic Solutions with my name listed as CEO. A forged driver's license with my photo but slightly altered personal information. Printed copies of fake employment verification letters claiming I'd been working at companies that didn't exist. Bank statements for accounts I'd never opened, showing carefully staged financial activity designed to support the loan application. But the most damning evidence was a handwritten notebook filled with what could only be described as a fraud manual. Page after page of detailed notes about my personal history, my financial habits, my social security number, my mother's maiden name. She'd even documented my daily routine. When I left for work, when I came home, how long I usually spend in the shower, presumably to ensure she had uninterrupted time to access my documents and computer. One page was titled Juliana's Security Questions and listed the answers to dozens of potential verification questions. My first pet's name, Whiskers, the street I grew up on, Maple Avenue, my favorite teacher, Mrs. Henderson, my childhood best friend, Casey Miller. Information I'd shared with her over years of normal sister conversations, never imagining she was cataloging it for future criminal use. Another page detailed her research into my employment at Henderson Marketing. She'd somehow obtained my salary information, my employee ID number, even the name of my supervisor. She'd called my workplace pretending to be from the IRS, claiming they needed to verify my employment for tax purposes. My trusting HR department apparently had given her everything she needed. But the page that made me physically sick was titled Loan Strategy Timeline. It was a month-by-month plan spanning 6 months, detailing exactly how she would establish fake business records, build credit history for her fictional consulting company, and gradually work up to the $750,000 loan application. Each step was carefully planned, with backup strategies in case certain approaches failed. At the bottom of the page, in her familiar handwriting, was a note that will haunt me forever. Jay is too trusting and disorganized to notice missing documents. Focus on maintaining helpful sister image while gathering additional verification materials. She hadn't just stolen my identity. She'd studied me like a mark, cataloged my weaknesses, and exploited my love and trust as tools for her crime. Agent Torres was still uncovering digital evidence. Miss Reeves, she's been monitoring your credit report regularly through multiple free credit monitoring services. She knew exactly when each of her fraudulent applications hit your credit file, and she was tracking the damage in real time. So she knew what this was doing to me? She knew everything. She even researched identity theft recovery procedures, probably so she could coach you through the process and deflect suspicion. The cruelest irony was becoming clear. Natasha hadn't just committed the crime, she'd been managing my response to it. All those conversations where she'd comforted me about the stress, suggested possible culprits, and offered emotional support were just another layer of her deception. She'd been playing both the criminal and the concerned sister, watching me suffer from a crime she committed while pretending to help me solve it.
Detective Martinez found the final piece of evidence in her purse, a prepaid phone that she'd been using to coordinate with associates I never knew she had. The call log showed regular contact with numbers traced to a document forging service in Denver and a fake employment verification company in Houston. My sister wasn't just a criminal, she was part of a sophisticated fraud network. As Agent Torres compiled the evidence, one detail stood out that explained why the bank had approved such a large loan despite their usual careful screening. Natasha had spent months building a credible business credit profile for Reeves Strategic Solutions, starting with small vendor accounts and gradually working up to larger credit lines. She created fake client testimonials, a professional website, even staged business bank account activity to support the loan application.
The $750,000 hadn't just disappeared into thin air. According to the digital trail Agent Torres uncovered, most of it had been immediately transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, accounts that would require international cooperation to trace and recover. My pregnant, struggling sister had built a criminal empire in my guest bedroom, and I'd provided the Wi-Fi. By Sunday evening, we had enough evidence to prosecute not just identity theft, but organized fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy charges. The woman I'd been supporting and protecting wasn't just a desperate sister making a bad choice. She was a professional criminal who'd been planning this heist for months, and I'd been the perfect victim. Trusting, helpful, and completely blind to the predator living under my own roof. Agent Torres closed her laptop and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Ms. Reeves, I want you to understand something. This wasn't your fault. Your sister is a sophisticated criminal who specifically targeted you because of your close relationship. She exploited your love and trust as weapons." But as I sat in my own living room, surrounded by evidence of the most calculated betrayal imaginable, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Natasha still thought she was going to get away with it. While Agent Torres and Detective Martinez were building an airtight case against my sister, the universe decided to deliver its own brand of justice. It started with a phone call that came at 6:47 a.m. on Monday morning. Too early for good news, too urgent to ignore. "Is this Juliana Reeves?" The voice was professional, but strained, like someone who'd been awake all night dealing with a crisis. "Yes, who's this?" "This is Amanda Walsh from First National Bank of Westridge, Fraud Investigation Department. Ms. Reeves, we need you to come in immediately. There's been a significant development in your case." I was already reaching for my clothes. "What kind of development?" "I can't discuss details over the phone, but I can tell you that your case has been escalated to our federal compliance team. Can you be here by 9 a.m.? And, Ms. Reeves, you might want to bring your attorney." I didn't have an attorney. Until 2 weeks ago, the most legal advice I ever needed was help understanding my lease agreement. But something in Amanda's tone made me realize I was about to need one desperately. The Westridge banking district was a gleaming stretch of glass towers that usually intimidated me, but that morning I walked into First National with a different energy. I wasn't the confused victim anymore. I was someone with evidence, with federal agents backing me up, with a clear picture of exactly what had happened to my financial life. Amanda Walsh turned out to be a serious woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that suggested she'd seen every type of financial crime imaginable. She led me to a conference room where 2 other people were waiting, a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as the bank's legal counsel, and a woman with FBI credentials who apparently worked with Agent Torres. "Ms. Reeves, I want you to understand something. The loan taken out in your name is connected to a much larger criminal operation. We're not talking about just identity theft anymore. We're talking about a sophisticated money laundering scheme that spans multiple states and involves several financial institutions." I opened the folder to find bank records, wire transfer receipts, and what looked like a complex flowchart showing money movement between dozens of accounts.
The numbers were staggering. Not just my $750,000, but millions of dollars flowing through a network of fake businesses and stolen identities. The loan in your name was just one piece of a puzzle, the FBI agent explained. Your sister appears to be part of an organized crime ring that's been operating for at least 2 years. They specialize in identity theft, document fraud, and international money laundering. Amanda pulled out another document. Here's what we've discovered in the past 72 hours. The $750,000 from your loan was immediately transferred to an account belonging to something called Mountain View Consulting Solutions, a company that doesn't actually exist but has been used to launder nearly $15 million over the past 18 months. But how does that connect to Natasha? Your sister is listed as the registered agent for Mountain View Consulting Solutions. She's also connected to at least 6 other fake businesses in Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona. This isn't some desperate pregnant woman making a bad decision, Ms. Reeves. This is a professional criminal who'd been planning this heist for months and used family connections to access victims' personal information. The bank's legal counsel leaned forward. Ms. Reeves, what I'm about to tell you is confidential, but you need to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. Your sister's criminal network has been under federal investigation for 8 months. The FBI has been tracking their money laundering operation, but they needed direct evidence of identity theft to make arrests.
My blood went cold. Are you saying the FBI knew about Natasha before I reported her? Not specifically about your sister, but they knew about the network she's part of. Your case provided the breakthrough they needed. When Agent Torres ran the forensic analysis on your computer and found evidence of Natasha's criminal communications, it connected directly to an ongoing federal investigation. Amanda pulled out a timeline that made my head spin. According to federal banking compliance records, the fraud network Natasha belonged to had been stealing identities and laundering money across the western United States for nearly 3 years. They targeted family members, romantic partners, roommates, anyone who would trust them enough to provide access to personal information. The other victims, I asked, how many are there? At least 47 confirmed cases with damages exceeding $22 million. Most of the victims were family members who never suspected their own relatives. The network specifically recruited people who had close relationships with financially stable individuals. The room started spinning. Natasha hadn't just betrayed me, she'd been recruited into a criminal organization specifically because she had access to me. My loving, supportive sister had been a professional con artist targeting her own family. There's something else, Amanda continued. This morning, we received a court order to freeze all accounts connected to the fraud network. That includes several accounts your sister has been using to hide the stolen money. She showed me a list of frozen assets that took my breath away. Bank accounts in multiple states totaling over $3.7 million. Real estate holdings in Denver and Phoenix worth nearly $2 million more. Luxury vehicles, jewelry, even a boat registered in Nevada, all purchased with money stolen from victims like me. Your sister has been living a double life, the FBI agent explained. While she was staying in your guest bedroom claiming to be broke and struggling, she was actually wealthy. She owns a condo in Scottsdale, drives a BMW that's registered under one of her fake business names, and has been traveling regularly to coordinate with other members of the fraud ring. I thought about all those nights she'd cried to me about money problems, all the times I'd bought groceries or paid for her prenatal vitamins because she claimed she couldn't afford them. She'd been playing poor while sitting on millions of dollars stolen from dozens of families. The pregnancy, I said suddenly. Is she even really pregnant? Amanda and the FBI agent exchanged a look. As far as we know, the pregnancy is real, but Miss Reeves, you should know that having a baby is often part of these criminals' long-term strategy. It creates sympathy, provides an excuse for erratic behavior, and makes family members less likely to suspect criminal activity. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. Even her pregnancy, something I'd been excited about, something I'd been planning my future around as a loving aunt, might have been calculated as part of her criminal strategy. What happens now? I asked.
Now we execute the arrest warrants, the FBI agent said. Your sister and 7 other members of her fraud network are being arrested simultaneously this morning. We've been coordinating with law enforcement in 4 states to ensure no one escapes. Amanda handed me another document. Miss Reeves, because the stolen funds have been located and frozen, we expect to recover most, if not all, of the money taken in your name. Their credit will be completely restored, and you'll likely be eligible for compensation for the damages you've suffered. I should have felt relieved. Justice was being served, the money would be recovered, my credit would be fixed. But all I could think about was the baby shower invitations I'd helped Natasha address the week before. The pink and blue decorations she'd asked me to help hang. The guest list that included our parents, our cousins, family friends who'd known us since childhood. The arrest, I said slowly. When is it happening? Within an hour. We have teams positioned at all locations connected to the network members. I looked at my watch. It was 10:15 a.m. Natasha's baby shower was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Riverside Gardens Community Center. By now, she'd be there, setting up decorations, arranging gift tables, probably texting me to ask when I'd arrive to help with the final preparations. She had no idea that while she was hanging streamers and setting up a candy buffet, federal agents were finalizing arrest warrants and coordinating with local police. She was planning to celebrate her upcoming motherhood with a room full of family and friends who loved her, completely unaware that her criminal empire had just collapsed and her double life was about to be exposed in the most public way possible.
The FBI agent's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and nodded to Amanda. All teams are in position. We're executing the arrests now. As I sat in that sterile conference room surrounded by evidence of my sister's criminal life, I realized that somewhere across town, Natasha was about to discover that her carefully constructed world of lies and stolen money was crashing down around her. And it was happening at her own baby shower, in front of everyone she'd been lying to for years. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of timing. The call came at 2:47 p.m., exactly 37 minutes after Detective Rodriguez had snapped those handcuffs on Natasha's wrists at the Riverside Gardens Community Center. I was still sitting in the FBI field office, giving my final statement about the evidence we'd uncovered, when my phone started buzzing with a number I didn't recognize. Then another call. Then another. "Miss Reeves," Agent Torres said, glancing at my phone screen, "you might want to consider not answering those. Word travels fast in situations like this, and you're probably about to become very popular with people who've been enabling your sister's lies." She was right. By the time I left the federal building an hour later, I had 23 missed calls and 41 text messages. The baby shower arrest had been witnessed by over 50 people, including family members, longtime friends, and several people who apparently had no idea they'd been helping a federal criminal celebrate her upcoming motherhood. The first voicemail was from my cousin, Rebecca, Natasha's college roommate, who'd driven down from Portland for the shower. Her voice was shaky, confused. "Jules, what the hell just happened? The police arrested Natasha at her baby shower. They're saying something about identity theft and money laundering. Everyone's asking questions and nobody knows what to tell them. Call me back immediately." The second was from my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister who'd helped organize the shower. "Juliana, I just watched my niece get arrested in front of half the family. People are saying she stole your identity? How long have you known about this? Why didn't you warn anyone? This is a disaster." But it was the third voicemail that made my hands shake. It was from my mother calling from Phoenix, and she sounded absolutely hysterical. "Jules, baby, I just got a call from Patricia saying Natasha was arrested at her baby shower? She's saying something about stealing money and using your name for loans. This can't be real. There has to be some mistake. Natasha would never. She's pregnant. She needs our help right now, not accusations. I need you to call me back immediately and explain what's happening. Your father and I are getting on a plane tonight." I turned my phone off and drove home in silence, trying to process the fact that my entire family was about to descend on me demanding explanations for why I'd allowed my sister to be arrested at what was supposed to be a celebration of new life.
They had no idea that I'd spent weeks being victimized by the same person they were now rushing to defend. When I got home, there was already a car in my driveway. My Uncle Frank, Natasha's godfather, was sitting on my front steps looking like someone had died. He stood up when he saw me, his face a mixture of confusion and accusation. "Jules, thank God, I've been calling you for an hour. What the hell is going on?" Patricia called me from the community center saying federal agents arrested Natasha for some kind of financial crime. They're saying something about identity theft and money laundering. She said you were involved somehow. I looked at this man who taught me to ride a bike, who'd given me my first job working summers at his landscaping company, who'd walked me down the aisle at my high school graduation when my father couldn't make it for work. He was looking at me like I was the criminal. "Uncle Frank, I think you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down. I want to know why my goddaughter is in federal custody and why nobody in this family saw it coming except apparently you." The accusation in his voice was clear. I was being blamed for Natasha's arrest, as if I'd somehow orchestrated the downfall of the golden child instead of being her victim. "She stole my identity," I said simply. "She took out a $750,000 loan in my name and destroyed my credit. She's been living a double life for months, maybe years. The FBI has evidence that she's part of a criminal network that's stolen millions of dollars from dozens of families." Uncle Frank stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "That's impossible. Natasha's struggling financially. She's been living with you because she can't afford her own place. She's pregnant and barely scraping by." "No, Uncle Frank. She's been pretending to struggle while hiding millions of dollars in offshore accounts. She owns property in Arizona, drives a BMW registered under a fake business name, and has been traveling around the country coordinating with other criminals. Everything you think you know about her situation is a lie."
He shook his head violently. "This doesn't make sense. Why would she steal from you? You're her sister. You've been supporting her." "That's exactly why she stole from me. Because I trusted her completely and gave her access to everything she needed to destroy my financial life." My phone started ringing again. I looked at the screen. Mom. I answered, knowing I couldn't avoid this conversation forever. "Juliana Marie Reeves, you tell me right now what you've done to your sister." Not what happened to your sister, or what did your sister do, what I had done to her. Even with Natasha sitting in federal custody, surrounded by evidence of sophisticated financial crimes, my family's first instinct was to blame me for her downfall. "Mom, I didn't do anything to Natasha. She committed federal crimes and got caught. She's been stealing my identity for months and laundering money through fake businesses. The FBI has evidence of—" "Don't you dare!" My mother cut me off, her voice sharp with the kind of maternal fury I remembered from childhood when I'd gotten Natasha in trouble. "Don't you dare try to make your sister sound like some kind of criminal mastermind. She's pregnant and vulnerable and obviously being manipulated by someone. The Natasha I raised would never do what you're describing." "The Natasha you raised stole $750,000 using my personal information and tried to destroy my credit so thoroughly that I couldn't get approved for a car loan." "That's enough," my mother screamed. "I don't know what kind of jealousy or resentment has poisoned your mind, but I will not listen to you destroy your sister's reputation when she can't defend herself." Uncle Frank was still standing in my driveway, but his expression had changed from confused concern to cold disappointment. "Jules, I've known you since you were born. I never thought you'd be the type of person who'd throw family under the bus for money." "I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. I reported a crime that was committed against me." "You had your pregnant sister arrested at her baby shower in front of 50 people who love her? You humiliated her and traumatized everyone who cares about her. Whatever she did or didn't do, there had to have been a better way to handle this." He walked to his car, then turned back. "Your parents are flying out here tonight. Someone needs to clean up this mess you've created." As I watched him drive away, I realized that my family had already decided who the villain was in this story.
It wasn't the career criminal who'd stolen my identity and laundered millions of dollars. It wasn't the woman who'd sat at my dinner table for months watching me suffer from crimes she'd committed while pretending to comfort me. It was me, the victim who dared to seek justice instead of protecting the family's reputation. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin, Rebecca. "Jules, I think you should know that everyone at the shower is saying you set Natasha up because you were jealous of her pregnancy. Aunt Patricia is telling people you've been planning this for months." I sat on my front steps, looking at my phone as more texts came in from relatives and family friends, all asking variations of the same question. How could I do this to my own sister? None of them were asking how my sister could have done this to me.
The family I thought would support me through the worst betrayal of my life had just told me that defending myself made me the enemy. But they had no idea what evidence was about to come out in court, or how much deeper Natasha's criminal life went than even I knew. They were about to learn that the pregnant victim they were rushing to defend was someone none of us had ever really known at all. My parents arrived Tuesday evening like an invading army. I heard their rental car pull into my driveway at 8:30 p.m., followed by the familiar sound of my father's heavy footsteps on the front walkway and my mother's voice giving directions about which suitcase to grab first. They had keys to my apartment, keys I'd given them years ago for emergencies, and they used them. I was sitting at my kitchen table going through legal documents Agent Torres had given me about victims' rights and the federal prosecution process when they walked into my home without knocking. The invasion felt appropriate, considering they were here to defend someone who'd invaded every aspect of my financial life. "Juliana," my mother's voice was ice cold as she set her purse on my counter like she owned the place. She looked older than I remembered, more tired, but her spine was straight with the rigid posture of someone prepared for battle. My father followed behind her, his jaw set in that familiar expression of paternal disappointment I remembered from teenage years when I'd broken curfew or failed a test. Except now I was 28 years old, and the disappointment was about my refusal to protect a federal criminal who happened to share my DNA. "Mom, Dad," I closed the legal folder, knowing this conversation was inevitable, but wishing I could postpone it indefinitely. "We just came from the county jail," my mother announced, as if this was somehow my fault. "Do you have any idea what your sister is going through right now? She's 7 months pregnant, sitting in a cell, scared and confused about charges she doesn't understand." "She understands the charges perfectly," I said, quietly. "She planned them for months." My father stepped forward, and I could see the veins in his neck bulging the way they used to when he was about to deliver one of his legendary lectures about responsibility and family loyalty. "Jules, I don't know what kind of misunderstanding happened between you and your sister, but this has gone too far. Natasha is carrying our grandchild. She needs support right now, not persecution." "It's not a misunderstanding, Dad. She committed federal crimes. She stole my identity, destroyed my credit, and laundered millions of dollars through fake businesses. The FBI has—" "I don't want to hear about the FBI." My mother cut me off sharply. "I want to hear about why you didn't come to us first. Why you didn't try to handle this as a family before involving law enforcement. Why you chose to humiliate your pregnant sister in front of 50 people instead of protecting her." The accusation hit like a slap. Protecting her. As if the person who'd systematically destroyed my financial life was the one who needed protection from me. "Handle it as a family?" I stood up, feeling my own anger rising for the first time since this nightmare began. "Mom, she stole $750,000 using my name. She created fake businesses, forged documents, and coordinated with a criminal network that's been stealing from families for years. What exactly was I supposed to handle about that?" "You were supposed to talk to her."
You were supposed to find out what happened, why she felt desperate enough to make such terrible choices, and then you were supposed to help her fix it quietly. I did talk to her. She lied to my face, tried to gaslight me, and threatened me when I confronted her with evidence. My father's expression suggested he didn't believe me. Natasha doesn't threaten people, Jules. She's not aggressive or manipulative. If she seemed defensive, it's probably because she was scared and didn't know how to explain what happened. I walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out the folder containing copies of everything Agent Torres had shown me. The fake business cards, the handwritten fraud manual, the bank records showing millions in laundered money, the timeline proving months of premeditation. Here, I said, spreading the documents across my kitchen table. Here's what happened. This is your daughter's handwriting detailing exactly how she planned to steal my identity. These are fake business cards with my name on them that she had printed. This is evidence of her coordinating with professional criminals in 4 different states. My parents looked at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. My mother picked up the handwritten fraud manual, scanning Natasha's familiar script, but her expression didn't change from defensive to shocked. It just hardened further. "I don't care what these papers say," she announced, setting the manual down without reading it thoroughly. "I know my daughter. Natasha is not a criminal mastermind. She's a scared, pregnant woman who made mistakes because she was desperate."
Mom, she owns a condo in Arizona that she bought with stolen money. She drives a BMW. She's been living a double life while pretending to be broke and staying in my guest bedroom. Even if that's true, my father said, his voice taking on the reasonable tone he used when he thought he was being patient with my stupidity. It doesn't change the fact that she's family. It doesn't change the fact that she needs help, not prosecution. I stared at him in disbelief. "She doesn't need help, Dad. She needs to face consequences for destroying my life and stealing from dozens of other families." "Your life isn't destroyed," my mother snapped. "You have a job, you have this apartment, you have your health. Natasha is the one sitting in jail while pregnant. Natasha is the one facing years in prison. Natasha is the one whose life is actually being destroyed." The twisted logic was breathtaking. In my mother's mind, the consequences of committing crimes were more tragic than the crimes themselves. "Here's what's going to happen," my father announced, settling into the authoritative tone that used to terrify me as a child. "We've hired Natasha the best criminal defense attorney in the state, Robert Fitzgerald. He's handled federal cases before, and he thinks there's a good chance we can get the charges reduced or dismissed if the family presents a united front." United front? "You're going to write a letter to the prosecutor explaining that this was a family misunderstanding that got out of hand. You're going to explain that you don't want to press charges and that you believe Natasha can make restitution without going to prison." I looked at both of them. These people who'd raised me, who'd taught me about right and wrong, who'd once grounded me for a week for cheating on a math test in 7th grade. Now they were asking me to lie to federal prosecutors to help a career criminal avoid consequences. I'm not writing that letter. Yes, you are. Because she's your sister, and that's what family does. We protect each other. She didn't protect me when she was stealing my identity. She didn't protect me when she was destroying my credit. She didn't protect me when she sat at this very table for months watching me suffer from crimes she committed. "She made mistakes," my mother said, as if systematic fraud spanning multiple states could be classified as a simple error in judgment. "But she's still your sister and she's still carrying your niece or nephew. Are you really going to let that baby be born in prison because you're too stubborn to forgive?" And there it was, the emotional manipulation I'd been waiting for. The baby card, the family loyalty guilt trip, the implication that I was the heartless one for wanting justice. "Mom, Dad, I love you both, but I'm not dropping charges against someone who committed federal crimes against me.
I'm not writing letters to prosecutors asking them to ignore evidence of professional money laundering. And I'm not going to pretend that protecting family means enabling criminals. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked at each other with the kind of meaningful glance that suggested they'd discussed this possibility and had a backup plan. "Then I guess we know where your priorities are," my mother said, standing up and smoothing her jacket. "I guess we know who you really are when it comes to family loyalty. Jules, my father and I raised you better than this. We taught you that family comes first, that blood is thicker than water, that you don't abandon people you love when they need you most. You also taught me that actions have consequences and that stealing is wrong. Not when it's family, not when there are bigger things at stake than money." They moved toward the door, and I felt a familiar panic rising in my chest, the same fear of abandonment I'd felt as a child when my parents were angry with me. But this time, I forced myself to stay seated. "If you can't support your sister through this, then maybe you shouldn't be part of this family until you figure out what loyalty really means." "Maybe I shouldn't," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my sister's crimes and my parents' ultimatum. Choose family loyalty over justice. Choose protecting a criminal over protecting myself. Choose silence over truth. I picked up my phone and called Agent Torres. "Agent Torres, this is Juliana Reeves. I want to make sure you know that my family is pressuring me to drop charges and write letters to prosecutors claiming this was a misunderstanding. I want it on record that I have no intention of doing that, no matter what they threaten."
Miss Reeves, we expected this kind of family pressure. It's common in cases where the perpetrator has been manipulating family dynamics for years. Are you in a safe place? Do you need protective resources? For the first time since this nightmare began, someone was asking if I was safe, instead of asking me to protect my abuser. "I'm safe," I said, "and I'm ready to testify against her if this goes to trial." Because choosing justice over family loyalty wasn't betrayal. It was choosing myself over people who'd never chosen me. The weeks following my parents' ultimatum became the most liberating period of my life. Though I didn't recognize it as liberation at first. It felt more like exile, cut off from the family that had defined my identity for 28 years, forced to rebuild not just my credit score, but my entire sense of self. But while my family was rallying around Natasha's defense fund and coordinating character witness letters, I was discovering something remarkable. My life was actually better without their constant drama and manipulation. Agent Torres called me on a Thursday morning with news that changed everything. "Miss Reeves, I wanted to update you on the asset recovery process. We've successfully frozen and seized approximately $4.2 million in assets connected to your sister's criminal network. Your portion of the recovery looks like it's going to exceed the original $750,000 by a significant margin." I almost dropped my coffee. "What do you mean, exceed it?" "Your sister used the loan taken out in your name as seed money for additional criminal enterprises. The money multiplied through various laundering schemes before we froze the accounts. Under federal asset forfeiture laws, victims are entitled to compensation that reflects not just their direct losses, but also punitive damages. We're estimating your recovery at approximately $1.3 million. The irony was staggering. My sister's betrayal was going to make me wealthy. But the money wasn't even the best part. The best part was the letter that arrived from Millbrook Heights Community College 3 days later. I'd always wanted to go back to school to get my graphic design degree, but between supporting Natasha and maintaining my emergency fund, I'd never felt financially secure enough to take the risk. Now, with my credit restored and a substantial settlement coming, I could afford to pursue dreams I'd put on hold for family obligations. I enrolled in classes for the fall semester: advanced digital design, small business management, and creative entrepreneurship.
For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted for my future instead of what my family needed from me. The silence from my relatives was initially deafening, but as weeks passed, it became peaceful. No more guilt-tripping phone calls about family loyalty, no more emergency visits from relatives in crisis, no more being volunteered to host holiday dinners or coordinate family events because I was the responsible one without a husband or children to worry about. I started therapy with Dr. Sarah Michelle, a specialist in family trauma and financial abuse. Our sessions helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just identity theft. It was systematic emotional and financial abuse that had been normalized within my family structure for years. Juliana, Dr. Michelle explained during one particularly enlightening session, you've been trained from childhood to prioritize everyone else's needs over your own. Your sister didn't just steal your identity, she stole your right to exist as anything other than a support system for her wants and needs. She was right. Looking back, I could see the pattern. Natasha getting the bigger bedroom because she was older. Me giving up my spot on the high school art trip so she could go to a friend's wedding. Me lending her money repeatedly over the years while never asking for financial help myself. Me always being the one who understood when plans changed to accommodate her schedule. I'd been so well trained to sacrifice for family harmony that I'd almost sacrificed my right to justice for the most serious crime anyone had ever committed against me. Meanwhile, my career was flourishing in ways I'd never expected. Henderson Marketing promoted me to senior creative director with a 40% salary increase after I completed a major client project ahead of deadline. The creativity that had been stifled by years of family stress and financial anxiety was finally flowing freely. I also started freelancing on weekends, taking on logo design and branding projects for small businesses. The work was fulfilling in a way my day job had never been, and the extra income was allowing me to build a real emergency fund for the first time in my adult life.
But the most significant change was in my relationships. Without the constant drain of family drama, I had energy to invest in friendships that had been neglected for years. My college roommate Sarah invited me to join her book club. My coworker David and I started having actual conversations instead of just work-related exchanges. I even went on a few dates, nothing serious, but reminders that there were people in the world who could spend an evening with me without asking for money, favors, or emotional labor. The contrast was stark. While my family was consumed with legal fees, jail visits, and crisis management around Natasha's case, I was taking weekend pottery classes, learning to cook for one person, and sleeping 8 uninterrupted hours every night. I bought new furniture for my apartment. Not expensive pieces, but things I actually liked instead of whatever was practical and accommodating for potential house guests. I painted my living room a soft lavender color that Natasha had once called too bold when I'd shown her the color sample. I hung artwork that made me happy instead of neutral pieces that wouldn't offend anyone's taste. Most importantly, I changed my locks. It was a symbolic gesture as much as a practical one. My parents no longer had keys to my home. My relatives couldn't show up unannounced, demanding emergency assistance or family loyalty tests. My space was finally mine alone. The legal proceedings were moving forward steadily. Natasha's expensive defense attorney, Robert Fitzgerald, had tried multiple strategies to get the charges reduced or dismissed, but Agent Torres kept me informed about each failed attempt. The evidence was simply too overwhelming, and the criminal network too extensive for any plea bargaining. Your sister's case has become a cornerstone of a major federal prosecution, Agent Torres explained during one of our regular check-ins. She's not just facing charges for your identity theft anymore. She's facing RICO charges for her participation in an organized criminal enterprise. We're talking about potentially 15 to 20 years in federal prison. I felt a complex mixture of emotions hearing this news. Sadness for the sister I'd thought I knew, relief that justice was being served, and something I was embarrassed to admit even to Dr. Michelle,
A sense of vindication that the person who'd tried to destroy my life was facing serious consequences. It's normal to feel satisfaction when someone who hurt you faces appropriate consequences, Dr. Michelle assured me when I finally admitted my conflicted feelings. That's not vindictiveness, that's a healthy recognition that actions have results. My mother called exactly once during this period, 3 weeks after their ultimatum. I let it go to voicemail, and her message was exactly what I expected. Jules, I hope you're happy. Your sister is falling apart in jail, the legal fees are destroying your father's retirement savings, and our whole family is being torn apart because you couldn't find it in your heart to forgive. I hope whatever point you're trying to make is worth it. I deleted the message without calling back, because the point I was making wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about recognizing my own worth. It was about understanding that family love shouldn't require self-destruction. It was about learning that protecting myself wasn't betraying others. It was finally choosing to be my own advocate instead of everyone else's caretaker. 6 weeks after my parents' visit, I received a certified letter from Natasha herself, sent from the federal detention center. I stared at the envelope for 20 minutes before opening it, knowing that whatever was inside would be another attempt to manipulate me into dropping charges or providing money for her defense. I was right. But I was also surprised by how little power her words had over me anymore. The letter was 3 pages of carefully crafted emotional manipulation. Apologies mixed with justifications, claims of desperation mixed with promises of repayment, and subtle threats about the baby's welfare mixed with guilt about destroying the family. But at the bottom of the last page, she'd written something that revealed more truth than she probably intended. I know you think I planned this to hurt you, but I never thought you'd actually fight back. She'd been counting on my conditioning. She'd expected me to prioritize family harmony over my own well-being, just like I'd been trained to do my entire life. But the person who would have sacrificed herself to protect a family member's reputation didn't live in my apartment anymore. The woman who'd replaced her was building something worth protecting. The intervention came on a rainy Saturday morning in November, exactly 3 months after Natasha's arrest. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop on Elm Street, working on a freelance logo design for a local bakery, when I noticed them filtering in one by one like they were executing a carefully planned operation. First, my cousin Rebecca walked in, ordering a complicated latte and choosing a table with a clear view of mine. Then Uncle Frank arrived, pretending to read a newspaper while glancing in my direction every few minutes. Finally, my childhood friend Casey Miller, someone I hadn't seen in over a year, appeared with what looked like a prepared speech folded in her purse.
I closed my laptop and waited. If my family wanted to stage an ambush, they could at least have the courage to approach me directly instead of lurking around the coffee shop like amateur spies. Casey was the first to break. She walked over with that apologetic smile she'd perfected in high school whenever she was about to ask for something she knew I didn't want to give. "Jules, hey, what a coincidence running into you here." "It's not a coincidence, Casey. I can see Rebecca and Uncle Frank pretending not to watch this conversation. What do you want?" Her smile faltered, and she gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Can I sit? There are some things we need to talk about." I nodded, curious to see what strategy they'd deployed this time. Casey had always been the family's choice for delicate negotiations because she had this way of making unreasonable requests sound like loving concern. "Jules, I've been talking to your parents, and everyone is really worried about you. This whole situation with Natasha has been so hard on the family, and I think maybe you don't realize how much damage it's causing." "What damage am I causing, Casey?" "Well, your dad had to take out a second mortgage to pay Natasha's legal fees. Your mom's been so stressed she ended up in the emergency room last week with what they thought was a heart attack, but turned out to be a panic attack. And the whole family is walking on eggshells because nobody knows how to talk about what's happening." I stirred my coffee and waited for her to get to the point. The guilt trip opener was predictable, but I was curious to see what they'd escalate to when the family health crisis angle didn't work. "The thing is," Casey continued,
I've been doing some research about federal cases like this, and the truth is that Natasha is probably going to prison regardless of what you do. The prosecutor doesn't really need your cooperation anymore because they have so much other evidence. That was interesting. They'd clearly been getting legal advice about how to approach me. So what you're saying is that my testimony doesn't matter. Exactly, which means you could ask the prosecutor to consider a lighter sentence for Natasha without actually changing the outcome of the case. You could show mercy without compromising justice. I almost laughed. They'd found a way to frame capitulation as a win-win scenario. Rebecca must have taken my silence as wavering because she suddenly appeared at our table as if she just noticed us sitting there. Jules, Casey, what are the odds of running into both of you here? Her acting skills needed work. Mind if I join you for just a minute? She sat down without waiting for permission and immediately launched into what was clearly her assigned talking points. Jules, I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the baby shower, and I have to say, I really admire how you handled everything. You did what you had to do, and nobody can fault you for that. But now I'm wondering if maybe it's time to think about the bigger picture. Which is? The baby, Jules. Natasha is due in 6 weeks. That baby is going to be born either in prison or with a mother who's facing 20 years in federal custody. Either way, that child is going to grow up without a mom, and it's going to be our family's responsibility to step up. Uncle Frank materialized at our table, as if summoned by some invisible signal. Jules, good to see you. We were just talking about the baby situation. The coordination was impressive, if obvious. They'd clearly rehearsed this intervention down to the timing of each person's arrival. The thing is, Uncle Frank continued, settling into a chair that someone had apparently saved for him, your parents aren't getting any younger. Your mom is 67, your dad is 71. They can't raise a baby at their age, especially with all the stress they're already dealing with. Casey leaned forward with practiced concern. We've been talking as a family, and everyone agrees that you'd be the best choice to take custody of the baby if something happens to Natasha. You're stable, you don't have kids of your own yet, and you're the baby's aunt. And there it was. The real purpose of this intervention. They weren't just asking me to show mercy to Natasha, they were preemptively volunteering me to clean up the consequences of her choices by raising her child. You want me to adopt Natasha's baby? Not adopt, necessarily. More like guardianship, just until Natasha gets out and can take care of the child herself. Which could be 20 years. Well, hopefully not that long. Robert Fitzgerald thinks there's a good chance of getting the sentence reduced to maybe 7 to 10 years with good behavior. I looked around the table at these 3 people who'd known me my entire life, who'd watched me sacrifice my own needs for family harmony countless times, who apparently still believed they could manipulate me into taking responsibility for problems I didn't create.
Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said slowly. You want me to ask the prosecutor to go easy on someone who stole my identity and destroyed my credit, and then you want me to spend the next decade raising her child while she's in prison for federal crimes? When you put it like that, it sounds unreasonable, Casey said defensively. But this is family, Jules. This is what family does. No, I said firmly. This is what I used to do. This is how I used to let everyone take advantage of me because I was afraid of being seen as selfish or disloyal. Uncle Frank's expression hardened. Jules, that baby didn't do anything wrong. Are you really going to punish an innocent child because you're angry at your sister? I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply not volunteering to clean up the mess that Natasha created through criminal choices. But who else is going to take care of the baby? Rebecca asked, as if this was somehow my problem to solve. That's something Natasha should have considered before she decided to commit federal crimes while pregnant. Her choices have consequences, and those consequences aren't my responsibility. Casey pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Jules, look at this ultrasound picture. This is your niece. She's going to be born next month, and she's going to need someone who loves her. The emotional manipulation was expert level, but I'd learned to recognize it for what it was. Dr. Michelle had spent weeks helping me understand the difference between loving someone and being responsible for the consequences of their poor choices. I can love my niece without sacrificing my own life to fix problems that her mother created. It wouldn't be sacrificing your life, Uncle Frank protested. You'd be giving a child a stable home and keeping our family together. Our family has been broken for months, Uncle Frank. It was broken the moment Natasha decided to steal my identity and destroy my financial life. It was broken when all of you decided to blame me for seeking justice instead of supporting me as a victim of federal crimes. The three of them exchanged glances that suggested they hadn't expected this level of resistance to their carefully planned emotional assault. Casey tried a different approach. Jules, I know you've been through a lot, and I know you feel hurt by how some people in the family have reacted, but this isn't about taking sides anymore. This is about doing what's best for an innocent baby. And what's best for that baby is having a mother who makes legal choices and doesn't expose her child to criminal enterprises. I can't provide that retroactively. Rebecca's patience was clearly running thin. So you're just going to let your niece go into foster care? You're going to let a member of our family be raised by strangers? I'm going to let the consequences of Natasha's choices play out naturally, instead of stepping in to protect her from the results of criminal behavior. Uncle Frank leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from persuasive to disgusted. You know what, Jules? I never thought I'd say this about Linda and Robert's daughter, but you've become selfish. You've become the kind of person who puts money and grudges ahead of family. I've become the kind of person who doesn't enable criminals even when they're related to me. Casey gathered her purse, clearly realizing their intervention had failed. Well, I hope you can live with yourself when that baby grows up in foster care, knowing her aunt chose revenge over love. I hope you can live with yourselves for asking a crime victim to take responsibility for her perpetrator's poor choices. As they filed out of the coffee shop, I realized that this would probably be the last time any of them attempted to manipulate me into solving problems I didn't create. They'd played their strongest card, the innocent baby angle, and I still refused to sacrifice my boundaries for family peace. I reopened my laptop and went back to designing a logo for a bakery whose owners had never stolen my identity, destroyed my credit, or demanded that I clean up their criminal mistakes. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in my adult life, I'd been presented with a family crisis that required my sacrifice, and I simply said no. And the world didn't end, the coffee shop didn't collapse, I didn't turn into a monster. I just went back to living my own life instead of managing everyone else's poor choices. The letter I wrote to my family wasn't born from anger or spite. It came from a place of crystal clear certainty about who I was and what I would and wouldn't accept in my life going forward. I'd spent weeks drafting it in my head, refining each word during therapy sessions with Dr. Michelle, and testing different approaches with my friend Sarah from book club, who'd become my unofficial sounding board for family drama. But it was the phone call from Natasha's defense attorney that finally prompted me to put pen to paper. Robert Fitzgerald called me on a Tuesday evening in late November, using a tone that suggested he believed charm and legal authority could accomplish what family manipulation had failed to achieve.
Miss Reeves, this is Robert Fitzgerald, representing your sister, Natasha, in her federal case. I'm calling because I believe there's an opportunity for us to work together toward a resolution that serves everyone's interests. I'm not interested in working with you, Mr. Fitzgerald. I understand your position, but I think you may not fully grasp the implications of how this case proceeds. Your sister is facing potentially 20 years in federal prison. Her baby will be born in custody. Your parents are facing financial ruin from legal fees. These are consequences that extend far beyond your sister's poor choices." The condescending tone was remarkable. He was simultaneously acknowledging that Natasha had made poor choices while suggesting that I was somehow responsible for the extended consequences of her criminal behavior. "Mr. Fitzgerald, those consequences are the direct result of your client's decision to commit federal crimes. They're not my responsibility to manage or minimize." "Ms. Reeves, with respect, your cooperation could significantly impact the sentencing recommendations. A letter from you expressing forgiveness and requesting leniency could mean the difference between 20 years and 7 years. That's 13 years of a child's life, with or without her mother. Then your client should have considered that before she decided to steal my identity and launder millions of dollars through fake businesses." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted from charming to slightly threatening. "Miss Reeves, I want you to understand that your testimony is going to be scrutinized very carefully. Defense strategies in federal cases often involve examining the credibility and motivations of key witnesses. If this case goes to trial, every aspect of your relationship with your sister will be made public. Every argument, every financial transaction, every family dynamic will be analyzed in federal court." The threat was subtle but clear. Cooperate, or we'll make the trial process as humiliating and invasive as possible. "Mr. Fitzgerald, is that a threat?" "It's information about how federal trials work. I'm simply making sure you understand what you're choosing when you refuse to consider a cooperative approach." I hung up on him and immediately called Agent Torres, who was unsurprised by the defense attorney's tactics. "Ms. Reeves, intimidation of federal witnesses is a serious crime. We'll be documenting this call and any similar attempts to pressure you. But I want you to know that your testimony is solid, and no defense strategy is going to change the overwhelming evidence we have against your sister." That conversation convinced me that a formal, written statement was necessary, not just for my family, but for the legal record. I needed to create a document that clearly established my position, my boundaries, and my refusal to be manipulated by anyone involved in this case. I spent 3 days writing it, treating it like the most important professional communication of my life, because, in many ways, it was. This wasn't just a letter to my family. It was my formal declaration of independence from a lifetime of emotional manipulation and guilt-based control. The final version was 2 pages, printed on professional letterhead I'd had made for my freelance design business. I mailed copies to my parents, Uncle Frank, Rebecca, Casey, and Natasha's attorney. I also provided a copy to Agent Torres for the federal case file. To my family and all parties involved in the federal case against Natasha Marie Reeves. I'm writing to establish, clearly and permanently, my position regarding the criminal charges against my sister and the ongoing pressure I have received to minimize my cooperation with federal prosecutors. Over the past 4 months, I have been subjected to continuous attempts to manipulate me into requesting leniency for someone who committed sophisticated federal crimes against me. These attempts have included emotional manipulation, financial pressure, threats of family abandonment, demands that I assume responsibility for consequences I did not create, and most recently, veiled legal threats from defense counsel. I want to be absolutely clear. I will not be requesting leniency for Natasha Marie Reeves. I will not be writing letters to prosecutors suggesting that her crimes were misunderstandings or desperate mistakes. I will not be minimizing the calculated, premeditated nature of her criminal enterprise and the systematic way she exploited our family relationship to commit federal crimes. Natasha did not make poor choices or mistakes. She planned and executed a sophisticated criminal operation over a period of months. She created fake businesses, forged documents, coordinated with professional criminals in multiple states, and laundered millions of dollars through offshore accounts.
She studied my personal information like a criminal manual, documented my daily routines to ensure uninterrupted access to my financial documents, and monitored my credit reports to track the damage she was causing to my financial life.
Most importantly, she sat at my dinner table for months, watching me suffer from crimes she had committed, while pretending to comfort me and help me solve the very problems she had created. This was not desperation. It was systematic psychological abuse combined with financial crime. I understand that some family members believe that blood relations should override considerations of justice, legal accountability, and personal boundaries. I categorically reject this belief system. Being related to someone does not obligate me to protect them from the consequences of criminal behavior. Being someone's sister does not require me to sacrifice my financial security, my mental health, or my moral principles to shield them from accountability. To those who have suggested that I am being vindictive, selfish, or unforgiving, I have forgiven my sister in the sense that I no longer carry anger about what she did to me. But forgiveness does not mean enabling continued criminal behavior or protecting someone from the natural consequences of their choices. Forgiveness does not require me to fund her legal defense, minimize her crimes to prosecutors, or assume responsibility for the child she chose to conceive while planning federal crimes. To Mr. Robert Fitzgerald and any other legal representatives, any further attempts to pressure, threaten, or intimidate me will be reported to federal authorities as witness tampering. I will be testifying truthfully about the crimes committed against me, and no defense strategy will change the documented evidence of your client's criminal enterprise. To my family, I understand that you believe family loyalty should override all other considerations. I no longer share this belief. I have learned that healthy families do not require their members to enable criminal behavior or sacrifice their well-being to protect someone from the consequences they have earned through their own choices. Going forward, I will not be participating in family discussions about Natasha's case, her sentencing, her appeals, or the custody arrangements for her child. These are consequences she created through criminal choices, and they are not my problems to solve. I will not be providing financial assistance for legal fees, commissary funds, or any other expenses related to her incarceration. I will not be visiting her in prison or maintaining contact during her sentence. I will not be assuming custody of her child or participating in childcare arrangements. I am not making these decisions from anger or vengeance. I am making them from a healthy understanding of personal boundaries and appropriate consequences for criminal behavior. I am choosing to invest my time, energy, and resources in building a life based on legal choices, honest relationships, and mutual respect. To those family members who cannot accept these boundaries, I understand that you may choose to exclude me from family gatherings, communications, or relationships going forward. That is your choice, and I respect it. I will not be attempting to maintain relationships with people who believe that my refusal to enable criminal behavior makes me disloyal or selfish. I am building a life surrounded by people who support my right to seek justice when crimes are committed against me, who respect my boundaries when I establish them, and who do not require me to sacrifice my well-being to manage problems I did not create. This letter represents my final statement on this matter. I will not be engaging in further discussions, negotiations, or appeals regarding my position. I will not be responding to future letters, phone calls, or intervention attempts designed to change my mind. I wish healing and growth for all family members who are capable of accepting accountability for their choices and respecting other people's boundaries. For those who are not capable of this growth, I wish you peace at a distance from my life. Sincerely, Juliana Marie Reeves. I printed and mailed the letters on a Friday afternoon, then went home and changed my phone number. I'd said everything I needed to say, established every boundary I needed to establish, and closed every door I needed to close. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in my adult life, I'd stated exactly what I would and wouldn't accept, without apology, justification, or room for negotiation.
I was no longer available for family drama, criminal enabling, or guilt-based manipulation. I was available for my own life, finally and completely. The media attention began 3 weeks after I sent my final letter to the family, though I didn't seek it out or expect it. It started with a phone call from investigative journalist Miranda Chen at Channel 7 News, who'd been following federal financial crime cases and had obtained court documents related to Natasha's prosecution. "Miss Reeves, I'm working on a story about organized identity theft rings and how they target family members. Your sister's case has become a significant example of how these criminal networks exploit trust relationships. Would you be willing to speak with me about your experience?"
Miss Reeves, based on my research, your case represents the largest family member identity theft prosecution in federal court this year. The way you handled the investigation and the pressure from your family to drop charges has caught the attention of victim advocacy groups and law enforcement agencies. Your story could help other people recognize similar situations and understand that they have the right to seek justice, even when the perpetrator is a family member. The idea that my experience could help other victims gave me a reason to consider going public. After discussing it with Dr. Michelle and Agent Torres, I agreed to a carefully controlled interview that would focus on the crime itself and the importance of reporting family member fraud, rather than sensationalizing the personal drama. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening in December as the lead story on Channel 7's investigative series, Crime Close to Home. Miranda had done her homework, presenting a balanced report that focused on the sophisticated nature of Natasha's criminal network and the challenges victims face when perpetrators are family members. According to FBI statistics, Miranda reported, nearly 30% of identity theft cases involve someone known to the victim, and family members represent the largest category of known perpetrators. But prosecution rates for family member identity theft are significantly lower than for stranger cases, primarily because victims feel pressured to handle these crimes privately rather than involve law enforcement. The segment included my interview, where I spoke calmly about the discovery process, the evidence that led to prosecution, and the importance of treating crimes as crimes, regardless of family relationships. I was proud of how I came across, professional, clear, and focused on facts rather than emotions. But the real impact came from the expert commentary Miranda had included. Dr. Patricia Williamson, a forensic psychologist who specialized in financial abuse, explained the psychological tactics that family member perpetrators use to avoid accountability. These criminals often exploit family loyalty and guilt to prevent victims from seeking justice, Dr. Williamson said. They count on victims prioritizing family harmony over personal protection. What makes Miss Reeves' case significant is that she refused to enable this dynamic and instead insisted on appropriate legal consequences. The segment also featured comments from Agent Torres about the broader criminal network and the importance of victim cooperation and prosecuting organized fraud schemes. Miss Reeves' willingness to testify and maintain her cooperation despite significant family pressure was crucial to our ability to dismantle this entire criminal enterprise. Her case helped us prosecute 8 additional defendants and recover millions in stolen assets. Within 24 hours of the broadcast, the story had been picked up by 3 major news networks and shared across social media platforms. But more importantly, it had reached people who needed to hear it. I received over 200 emails and messages through the news station from viewers who'd recognized similar patterns in their own families. Women whose brothers had opened credit cards in their names, men whose parents had taken out loans using their children's social security numbers, adult children who discovered that trusted relatives had been systematically stealing their identities for years. Many of these messages included the same heartbreaking theme. They'd suspected family members of financial crimes, but felt too guilty or loyal to report them. They'd been told by other relatives that family doesn't call the police on family, and that they should handle these situations privately. The validation was overwhelming. For months, I'd been told by my own family that I was vindictive, selfish, and disloyal for seeking justice. Now I was hearing from strangers who understood exactly what I experienced and were grateful to see someone choose accountability over enablement. Miranda called me a week after the broadcast to let me know about the response her story had generated. Miss Reeves, since your segment aired, our newsroom has been contacted by 5 other families dealing with similar situations. 3 of them have now filed police reports after months of trying to handle identity theft privately. Your willingness to speak publicly about this has literally helped other people seek justice. But the external validation that meant the most came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks after the news broadcast, I received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Division in Washington, D.C. The letter was signed by Assistant Director Rachel Morrison and thanked me for my cooperation in what had become one of the most successful prosecutions of organized identity theft in recent federal court history. Ms. Reeves, your case has provided crucial insights into how criminal networks exploit family relationships to access victims' personal information. Your testimony and evidence were instrumental in securing convictions against all 8 defendants in this conspiracy, and your refusal to be intimidated by family pressure demonstrates the importance of treating financial crimes seriously regardless of family relationships. But the paragraph that brought tears to my eyes was the one that addressed the broader impact of my case.
Your willingness to prioritize justice over family pressure has been cited in 3 federal court decisions as an example of appropriate victim response to family member financial crimes. Legal advocacy organizations are using your case to train victim services professionals about the unique challenges faced by victims of family member identity theft. Your courage in seeking accountability has created legal precedent that will help protect future victims. I was helping to change how the legal system approached family member financial crimes. My decision to refuse enablement and demand accountability wasn't just protecting me, it was creating pathways for other victims to seek justice without guilt or shame. The letter concluded with information that took my breath away. Based on evidence discovered through your case, federal authorities have opened investigations into similar criminal networks in 12 additional states. We estimate that your cooperation has led to the identification of more than 200 additional victims and the potential recovery of over $50 million in stolen assets. My sister's betrayal had accidentally exposed a criminal enterprise that had been victimizing families across the country for years. Agent Torres called me the same day I received the FBI letter to share additional news about the broader investigation. Ms. Reeves, I wanted you to know that your case has been selected as a model prosecution by the Department of Justice. They're using it in training programs for federal prosecutors who handle family member financial crimes. Your case is literally being taught in law schools as an example of how to properly investigate and prosecute identity theft when family dynamics complicate victim cooperation. The irony was remarkable. My family had spent months telling me I was destroying lives and breaking apart relationships by seeking justice. In reality, my decision to pursue accountability had helped protect hundreds of other families and created legal frameworks that would make it easier for future victims to seek help. 3 days before Christmas, I received a call from Dr. Patricia Williamson, the forensic psychologist who'd been featured in Miranda's news report. Ms. Reeves, I'm calling because I've been contacted by the National Center for Victims of Financial Crimes. They're developing a support program specifically for victims of family member identity theft, and they'd like to know if you'd be interested in serving on their advisory board. Your case has become a reference point for understanding how family dynamics can complicate recovery from financial crimes. I'd gone from being an isolated victim dealing with family pressure and guilt to being recognized as someone whose experience could help shape support systems for other people facing similar situations. The external validation wasn't just personally satisfying. It was proof that choosing justice over family pressure had been the right decision, not just for me, but for countless other victims who deserved to see accountability rather than enablement. While my family was still focused on minimizing consequences for a federal criminal, the rest of the world was recognizing the importance of treating crimes as crimes regardless of family relationships. I'd found my people, and they weren't connected to me by blood. They were connected to me by shared values of accountability, justice, and the belief that love doesn't require enabling harmful behavior.
For the first time in my life, I was part of a community that celebrated my strength rather than demanding my sacrifice. 1 year after Detective Rodriguez snapped those handcuffs on Natasha at her baby shower, I was standing in the conference room of the National Center for Victims of Financial Crimes in Denver, Colorado, looking out at 43 victim advocates from across the country who'd gathered for our quarterly training session. As the newest member of their advisory board, I was about to deliver my first presentation on recognizing and responding to family member financial abuse. The irony was not lost on me. A year ago, I'd been too ashamed to tell my closest friends that my sister had stolen my identity. Now I was training professionals how to help other victims navigate the complex intersection of family loyalty and criminal accountability. Family member financial abuse thrives in silence, I began, clicking to my first slide. It survives because we're conditioned to believe that blood relationships should override legal boundaries, that love means protecting people from consequences, and that seeking justice within families is somehow a betrayal rather than an act of self-preservation. The audience was engaged, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. These were people who understood that my expertise didn't come from textbooks or theoretical training. It came from living through something that had nearly destroyed me and choosing to transform that experience into wisdom that could help others. Natasha had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to RICO charges, money laundering, and identity theft. The judge had been particularly harsh in his sentencing remarks, noting that her exploitation of family relationships demonstrated a profound lack of moral character and a willingness to destroy the very people who should have been able to trust her most.
She'd given birth to a daughter, my niece Emma, in federal custody. The baby had been placed with a foster family in Colorado after my parents, despite their initial declarations about family responsibility, had been deemed unsuitable guardians due to their age and the stress-related health issues they'd developed during Natasha's prosecution. I'd felt a complex mixture of emotions when Agent Torres told me about Emma's placement. Sadness that a child was paying the price for her mother's choices. Relief that I wasn't being pressured to sacrifice my rebuilt life to clean up consequences I hadn't created. And a strange sense of peace, knowing that Emma would grow up in a stable home with people who'd chosen to love her, rather than being raised by relatives who felt obligated to manage the fallout from criminal behavior. My parents had moved back to Arizona after the sentencing, and we hadn't spoken since. Uncle Frank had sent me a brief email 6 months ago, letting me know that Dad had suffered a mild heart attack, probably stress-related, but recoverable. I'd sent flowers to the hospital with a card wishing him well, but I didn't call or visit. The boundary I had established wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting myself from people who demonstrated that they would always prioritize enabling over accountability. My new life had crystallized around principles I'd never articulated before this experience, but now understood were foundational to my well-being. I surrounded myself with people who celebrated growth rather than demanding sacrifice. I built relationships based on mutual respect rather than guilt-based obligation. I invested my time and energy in projects that reflected my values rather than managing crises I didn't create. My freelance design business had grown into a full-time enterprise with 12 regular clients and a waiting list. I'd specialized in branding for small businesses owned by women and minorities, entrepreneurs who understood the value of building something from scratch based on authentic values rather than inherited expectations. I'd also completed my degree in graphic design, graduating summa cum laude at the age of 29. The graduation ceremony was small but meaningful. Dr. Michelle attended, along with my friend Sarah from book club, my coworker David, who'd become a close friend, and Miranda Chen, the journalist who'd become an unexpected ally in my journey toward public advocacy. The absence of family at my graduation didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like freedom from the exhausting cycle of performing success for people who'd never really supported my actual growth. But the most significant change in my life was the relationship I developed with Marcus Rivera, a fellow member of the Victim Advocacy Board who'd survived financial abuse from a romantic partner. Our connection had grown slowly, built on shared understanding of betrayal and recovery, rather than the kind of desperate need for approval that had characterized my previous relationships. Marcus understood why I needed clear boundaries and explicit communication.
He'd learned, as I had, that healthy love doesn't require self-destruction, and that trust must be earned through consistent, reliable behavior over time. We'd been together for 8 months, and every day reinforced my understanding that relationships built on mutual respect felt completely different from relationships based on guilt, obligation, or fear of abandonment. As I concluded my presentation to the victim advocates, I shared the philosophy that had emerged from my experience and now guided everything I did personally and professionally. Recovery from family member financial abuse isn't just about restoring credit scores or recovering stolen money. It's about developing the ability to distinguish between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and criminal enabling, between forgiveness and access. A woman in the front row raised her hand. How do you help clients understand the difference between forgiveness and continuing relationship? That seems to be where most people struggle. It was a question I'd wrestled with extensively in therapy and now felt confident answering. Forgiveness is an internal process that benefits the victim by releasing them from carrying anger and resentment. It's something you do for your own peace of mind, not as a gift to the person who harmed you. Continued relationship, on the other hand, is a privilege that must be earned through accountability, changed behavior, and respect for boundaries. I clicked to my final slide, which contained a quote that had become my personal mission statement. You can forgive someone completely while still refusing to give them access to harm you again. After the presentation, I drove to the small coffee shop where I'd started writing my first victim impact statement 2 years ago. I ordered the same lavender latte I'd been drinking that day, sat at the same table, and opened my laptop to work on the memoir I'd been writing about the experience. The book wasn't meant to be a sensational tell-all about family betrayal. It was intended as a practical guide for people navigating the intersection of criminal justice and family dynamics. I partnered with Dr. Patricia Williamson to create something that combined personal narrative with professional insights about recognizing, reporting, and recovering from family member financial abuse. The working title was Blood Money: When Family Members Become Financial Predators, and it was scheduled for publication next spring through a small press that specialized in victim advocacy resources.
As I reviewed the latest chapter, my phone buzzed with a text from Agent Torres. The message was brief but significant. Juliana, wanted you to know that the training program based on your case just graduated its 100th law enforcement officer. Your story is literally changing how we investigate family member financial crimes across the country. I smiled and saved the document I'd been working on. 2 years ago, I'd been an isolated victim struggling with shame and family pressure. Now, I was part of a movement that was transforming how society understood the intersection of family relationships and criminal behavior. The woman who'd once been afraid to report her own sister for federal crimes was now training others to recognize that seeking justice within families wasn't betrayal, it was self-preservation. The victim who'd been told she was destroying her family by refusing to enable criminal behavior was now helping other victims understand that they had the right to protect themselves regardless of family pressure. I'd learned that healing wasn't about rebuilding the relationships that had been damaged by someone else's criminal choices. It was about building new relationships with people who understood that love doesn't require self-destruction, that family loyalty shouldn't override legal accountability, and that forgiveness doesn't mean providing continued access to harmful people. Most importantly, I discovered that the life I built from the ashes of family betrayal was more authentic, more peaceful, and more fulfilling than anything I'd experienced while trying to manage other people's poor choices. The woman sitting in that coffee shop working on a book that would help other victims find their voice and their strength was someone I'd never been able to be while I was prioritizing family harmony over personal protection. She was someone I was proud to have become, and someone I would never again sacrifice to protect people who'd proven they didn't deserve that sacrifice. The greatest revenge against someone who tries to destroy your life isn't bitterness or retaliation. It's building something so authentic and fulfilling that their betrayal becomes the catalyst for your greatest transformation.